Hello and welcome back to another edition of Press Pass on GNet TV. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director here at GNet TV's News Project, and it's my pleasure to be your host today, and also my pleasure to have with us two journalists here in the studio to talk about what's been going on in the area for the past 4 or 5 weeks since our first show. With me today are Greg Sukenik, who's the editor of the Manchester Journal, and also Cherise Madigan, who is a reporter for both the Journal and the Bennington Banner. Thank you both for coming today and being part of our panel. Well, it's been a busy month of news stories and activities over the past few weeks since the last time we were down here. And a lot of it centered around education-related issues, not just high school graduations, and important as those are for the graduates and their families, of course. But we've had a number of stories come up. And while a lot of our focus on the show is going to be about, obviously, local events or regional events around the county, every now and then a statewide story pops up that has a local echo. And obviously one of the biggest stories in the state over the past couple of weeks was the resolution of the state budget that took place in Montpelier on June 21st. Many viewers will remember that lawmakers and the governor ended the session in a bit of a standoff over the budget, which was complicated by a measure Governor Phil Scott wanted to introduce into that that affected the public school teachers' health insurance contracts. The governor saw an opportunity to free up about $26 million in new money, I guess you could say, that he thought might be available to provide some property tax relief. Number of complicating factors, including that being a statewide negotiation rather than school board to school board. The statewide teachers union got a little concerned about that. To make a very long story short, they were able to resolve that in a bit of a compromise. I think ultimately about $13 million was found to be spread over 2 years, and it will be a board-to-board, not a statewide negotiation when they go back to talking about it again. But the local angle here was that a few weeks prior to that, both the Bennington-Rutland Supervisory Union negotiating team and the Bennington-Rutland Supervisory Union teachers reached an agreement that was a little bit different from what the governor was looking at. They measured theirs in dollars rather than percentages of co-pays and premium payments. And unless you're an accountant or somebody who loves insurance, it's really easy to get bogged down in the weeds of this stuff. So we're going to go to David Chandler right here, who is the chairman of the Dorset School Board and was the leader of the BRSU's negotiating team, and he'll explain a little bit about what they came up with.
We don't know how much real savings there will be if everybody enacted the health care program the way the governor wanted, with the 80-20 percentage breakdown and all that. We really don't, because I think there's a lot of other factors that come to play that people aren't aware of. So what we focused on is what we thought were the benefits of the new health care format that the Affordable Care Act has promoted. And so we focused on spending dollars instead of percentages. We focused on trying to steer people towards health savings accounts so that they would have money in those accounts that they could spend for out-of-pocket expenses. We tried to figure out ways to smooth the transition so that the early years or early months when there's no money in the health savings account. That's the danger, is that you switch over to this new account and you've got this new approach and you've got this savings account that's supposed to have money in it, but the money can't be put in up front. It has to be put in periodically. That's mandated by the government. So there's the first few months, or maybe even 6 months, when it takes a while before the account's big enough to cover out-of-pocket expenses. Once it's established, out-of-pocket expenses are pretty much covered for everybody all the time. So it's a very powerful win-win kind of program.
Okay, well, it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. Big story, and it will involve a lot of dollars. And of course, with the Taconic and Green merger coming in, that's another new wrinkle there. But also, Greg, down in Arlington, a couple of interesting stories emerged last week, and you had them in the Journal. One was about the $1.6 million infrastructure project that Arlington is looking to bring forward that would affect both the Fisher Elementary School and the high school. And also, Arlington stands on Act 46, the statewide consolidation measure. Tell us a little bit about those. Where do they stand?
Okay, let's start with the construction project. The Arlington voters had voted at town meeting to move forward with that project, getting it done before any Act 46 situation might affect the town and its schools. What they found was that the bids came in over, and there's the locus seems to be in the gymnasium rather than the ventilation and cooling systems that are also being renovated. So this also kind of touches on the availability of contractors to do the work. The governor has talked a lot about workforce training and about the lack of tradespeople in the state. Our own Don Keelan has written about that as well in a column for the Journal. So there's a couple different things here. I mean, contracts, sometimes bids come in over, it just happens. There's inflation or things are costed differently. But the interesting part of that to me is the aspect of finding people who actually do the work. And some of the trades are, I think, with the emphasis on college education, the trades I think sometimes get overlooked. But the truth is they're usually good paying jobs. They're often union jobs. They do require education and training. So they're worthwhile pursuits. And to the extent that those professions aren't available to people, that also it affects growth and affects the ability of Vermonters to have to do the things they want to do, like renovate their school gym.
Mm-hmm. Now, were they hopeful of using local contractors for this work? I mean, most of these projects tend to want
generally,
to
that's the way,
try to hire as locally as possible.
Generally, that's the way the districts like to go. They like to be able to know to know who they're dealing with. Mm-hmm. It's skipping states, but in a previous life, when I was a reporter at the Berkshire Eagle in Pittsfield, there was a large school project, and there was concern about whether the lowest qualified bid would come from out of the county, and so that was sort of
politically charged question.
It's a politically charged question, but it's also just quite simply knowing who you're dealing with,
right,
and having an idea that maybe there might be some more investment in the job if folks who are from town maybe went to that school, had an interest in doing their best work.
So I know the centerpiece of that project was going to be the renovation work they were hoping to get done on the Arlington High School gym. I gather that may be put off a year until 2018 instead of being done this summer, which is what I think was the original idea. So
yes.
we'll be watching that one. And while we're in Arlington, I guess it's been kind of an interesting mystery to me to try to get a handle on where Arlington is going to wind up going on Act 46. They seem to be a bit of an anomaly, in part because they're one of the few towns that doesn't offer school choice. I mean, they have schools all the way from pre-K to 12 right in town. Virtually every other community I can think of around here has some degree of school choice at some point or another, even Manchester for that matter. But I guess the wild card here is Sandgate. Little Sandgate, population 300 or so, has more options than Arlington, could wind up going to Rupert or Winhall or Paulet, or being joined within the BRSU.
Sure.
But Arlington seems to be standing pat at the moment.
Yes, I think Arlington has a tight-knit community with a real sense of identity, and I think a lot of it revolves around the school. So I don't get the sense that there's a great interest in a merger that would add Arlington to either the BRSU or to the union in Bennington. What they're possibly looking for is more of an administrative union, possibly with maybe involving Sandgate, depending on what they decide, maybe involving Winhall or Rupert, maybe joining the BRSU. But what seems to be, I think one of the concerns about Act 46 when it was drafted and passed was that it was going to force smaller districts such as Arlington to shut down and to lose that identity. And there was a lot of, the back and forth in the governor's race was about that sort of leftover debate over that question. But it appears that the Agency of Education, at least under the current administration, has less interest in forcing districts to find a dance partner to merge at least. I think they would like them to find dance partners. And so for the time being, Arlington is a K through 12, and I think they like that arrangement.
Yeah, well, yes. Historically, they certainly have liked that, and very loath to change that. I mean, I guess I assume that eventually they would wind up within the BRSU, because for the simple reason there was no place else for them to go.
Right.
Unless
It'll be
they wanted to
interesting.
merge with somebody in the Northeast Kingdom or something
Sure.
like that.
I mean, the state wants to try to avoid those mergers that don't have geographic that aren't contiguous. And who knows? I think I've always wondered about what kind of outside the box thinking would possibly bring Arlington into a larger district, and whether it would have to be something that in which Arlington wouldn't lose the high school. I think that's. I get the sense that that's the. That's the line of demarcation for that.
Right, because it is one of the smaller high schools, and the Battenkill Valley Supervisory Union, I believe, is the smallest supervisory union in the state in terms of enrollment. Well, and while we're in Arlington, Sharice, and Sandgate, Sharice, you had a very interesting story in this week's journal on June 30th. About Dorothy Canfield Fisher, a much revered and I guess you'd be fair to say beloved author who wrote extensively about, well, roughly 100 or so years ago. Fisher Elementary School, which we were just talking about, named after her. And this story is going to be a bit of an eye-opener, I think, for a lot of folks who have been used to thinking of her as one of the bright stars of Arlington's history. So what is in the story?
Absolutely. So Dorothy Canfield Fisher, a lot of us are familiar with that name because of her moniker on the State Book Award that's given out by the Vermont Department of Libraries to a children's book that promotes excellence among children's literacy. And recently, her name on that award has really come under fire because Dorothy Canfield Fisher has some ties, though tangential, to the eugenics movement here in Vermont, which is a very dark chapter of our history. And regardless of how concrete those ties are, that's really what's under question right now, and what the state librarian, Scott Murphy, has to sift through to make a decision on whether her name should stay on the award. Regardless of her ties, I think that there are a lot of issues with the things she stated in her different works regarding race and regarding eugenics in general. The biggest key of the story that came out of the journal, I believe, is that Fisher was involved in the Vermont Commission on Country Life, which was affiliated with the Vermont Eugenics Survey run by Henry F. Perkins, the University of Vermont professor, credited with really bringing eugenics to Vermont with fire behind it. And she was involved deeply with this Commission on Country Life and actually was moved up to an executive position in it, I think around 1933. And around that time, there was a survey done on Sandgate, which was meant to exemplify rural degeneracy. And Sandgate also had a high French, Canadian, Native American population at the time. Shortly after the survey came out, really kind of being very, very rude to people in Sandgate, calling them, half-breeds and things like that, Fisher came out with her book Bonfire, which used the exact same names from the survey. So the link between the two is hard to deny, but overall, I think the State Board of Libraries is going to have a hard decision on whether or not her name should stay on the award because of all the good things that she did do. She was a great author, very prolific, ahead of her times when it came to women's rights and things like that. Did a lot for the community and social work, but at the same time had these very questionable ties. So we'll see where that ends up going.
I guess, is there a lot of evidence that she basically supported the eugenics movement, which of course, as many will remember, is kind of a race-based selection, genetic kind of decision about who was, better than others? Or was she just serving on the board and kind of being an advisor to this?
Yeah, that's the really tough question, and I think that's where the main conflict comes from in this decision, because she wasn't part of the Vermont Eugenics Survey outright, but the Vermont Commission on Country Life was established by the Vermont Eugenics Survey, so it's difficult for us to look at it and say Dorothy Canfield Fisher knew this and kept staying on. There's no evidence to say that she was aware, but it is kind of hard to see how she wasn't at the same time. And either way, I think that the crux of the issue is that she did put forth those views in those statements, even if she wasn't directly linked to eugenics or the eugenics movement. And I think that in this case, the context of this controversy is really crucial because it is the name of a children's book award. So regardless if she does have those concrete ties to eugenics, I think that there's an argument to be made that if any child feels like they're kind of being prohibited from enjoying the children's literacy program that this is supposed to promote, then I think that's something we need to look at very carefully and take seriously.
Well, interesting and very, very provocative kind of story. It certainly will be come as a surprise, I'm sure, to a lot of folks.
It's there's sure to be a lot more on this, and I think the debate on it will be healthy because it's going to force us to sort of look at ourselves in the mirror and understand the way we view Dorothy Canfield Fisher, but also understand the way we view the issues that were raised by the eugenics survey, and which happened in broad daylight. It was not a secret. So, I mean, it was an act of the legislature, helped propel it along. So it's going to be a very interesting debate, and I look forward to it. I think we'll have. I would be surprised if there wasn't several letters to the editor about that by the time this is all over.
And perhaps a follow-up story as well,
Hopefully,
or two
yes.
or three.
Yes.
Well, we'll see. Well, let's move on and talk a little bit about what's been going on with the Manchester Business Association, or MBA. They had a new visitor center open and a lot of early marketing efforts, new website up and running. We also have a new arts initiative program about to be unveiled, the Arts Manchester, I believe. A couple of the vacant stores will be converted into arts galleries for at least a little while. So what's going on here? Greg, let's start with you. What do we make of all of this? Is this going to be a good way to kind of get Manchester on the map for visitors to flock here in the summer months and then on into the fall?
The early indications seem to be positive. I'm told, reported that their web hits on the site manchestervermont.com have actually they've been healthy. The visitor center is open to some pretty positive reviews. Certainly the location. It's on the main rotary in the middle of Manchester Center, right across the street from the Northshire Bookstore. It's almost as if it was designed for it, and it's also serving as a office for ITV Fest, for the Independent. Excuse me. I keep doing that. One of these days I'm going to get that right.
I'm sure Phil Gilpin won't mind.
Phil Gilpin won't mind because I got it wrong in print the first time. Independent Television Festival has its offices there, and they're helping to staff the center as well. So there was a public forum about MBA's progress at the Taconic Hotel last week or the week before, and they discussed, they're starting to look at, their work is underway, largely digital media, and they're already thinking about what they're going to do next year, and about the two areas where what they want to make a big push is the number of volunteers and on funding. So they had about $80,000 worth of funding to get done what they did. So they're going to be looking for more in order to sort of have a full year, full-time marketing push. And in terms of volunteer, they're just looking, very basically, just looking for folks to staff the visitor center and take part in their initiatives.
Now, earlier there was some discussion about the Bennington Area Chamber of Commerce, kind of, and those interested in the Manchester business community, folks who were concerned that with Manchester not having a Chamber of Commerce of its own anymore, that we were going to be kind of in a bit of a difficult place. But it doesn't sound like there's much discussion, at least that I've heard, about some kind of merger or synchronization between the Bennington Area Chamber and the MBA.
Well, I think the synchronization. I think merger certainly would not be the word that would describe what might happen next. Synchronization, however, might be the right term. What the folks, Jonas Spivak and Matt Harrington. I'm going to make sure I had the right Harrington. Of the Bennington Chamber, what they had told us is that they want to work with the MBA. So the Manchester Business Association is concerned solely with Manchester by design. The the larger Chamber of Commerce in its sort of Vision 2020 plan, sort of extending beyond Bennington to include the rest of Bennington County and the sort of greater Shires area. They're interested in working with MBA sort of as part of, not as part of the group, but as sort of being able to sort of back them up on a regional basis and allowing them to continue that Manchester-centric role. That's, I think Jonas Spivak is also, he's the head of the board of the Bennington Chamber. He and Matt Harrington have talked about wanting to not come on too strong about this, about being gradual and about, there is interest in their group. A number of North Shire businesses have joined, but they don't want to come across as taking over.
Right.
I think that's something that they're very they're adamant that they don't want to be seen. They don't want to do that, and they don't want to see it as being that sort of thing. They're also interested in getting representation from North Shire businesses on their board, and so I think it's to the point that maybe movement doesn't seem as strong. I think it's a gradual process, and that really over the next several months, we'll sort of see where it goes, if that initial interest in North Shire businesses in Bennington Area Chamber membership grows beyond where it started.
Still certainly early in the process here. And one of the things, Charisse, I was wondering, that I think is kind of interesting about all this is the arts and creative economy component of this. I mean, we've heard a lot about the struggles of retail, which of course was what Manchester built a lot of its economy around for decades now. But with the arrival of e-commerce and Amazon, I guess some of the retail businesses are, going through a period of struggle, I think would be fair to say. But in the meanwhile, one of the things that might pick up the slack, so to speak, would be the arts community. We have a fairly wide representation of arts here, from theater to the Southern Vermont Arts Center to Manchester Music Festival, and now the Taconic Music Festival as well. Do you think that there's a sense going on that some of that will sort of, as I mentioned a moment ago, pick up the slack?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's really what the town is almost depending on for our future and what we're looking towards. I think Bennington and Manchester, we're both at a similar place, even though we're very different towns, where both towns are really trying to reevaluate their identity going into the future, and they're coming from very different vantage points. In Manchester, the biggest struggle is the decline of retail. Nationally, those big retail behemoths are kind of crumbling down. People are calling it a retail bubble burst even nationally. So in Manchester, instead of saying we need to fill all these empty storefronts with a lot more retail, let's try to even it out, and let's try to get local people involved in business. So what the town and what the Business Association are really both looking to do is to promote those unique, small, local businesses that people who live here can enjoy and promote the self-sustaining economy that we've already begun to build, and that tourists can also come and shop and enjoy and really find an identity and a culture within it. And that's, I think, the viewpoint of the town, is that we can insulate ourselves more from the online shopping economy with those businesses, because something you buy at Fortuna's Italian market in downtown, you're not going to find that on Amazon. At the same time, we need to have more institutions here in town that provide affordable living necessities for the people that live here. I live here in town in Manchester. If I want to go out and buy new bed sheets, I can't really do that anywhere in town that's affordable for a 24-year-old like myself. So I would have to drive to Bennington or Rutland to get something within my price range. So the combination of those self-sufficient kind of creative local businesses alongside businesses that provide more utility to locals is going to be the key going forward, I think. And Arts Manchester is a great start to that.
Right, yeah, I mean, I know the arts community has been looked to for a while to be kind of a third leg of the triad or whatever, yes. To draw people into town. And one of the things I've often wanted to see is some really solid data around that. Okay, I mean, it makes sense that you would have a lot of people coming here for the Dorset Theatre Festival or for the Weston Theatre or for the Arts Center or for one thing or another, but what I've never really seen are hard numbers. Like how many people actually do come here for that? How much do they spend?
And that's so hard. I think it comes from our lack of a chamber at this moment as well. I mean, we have the Business Association, but they've been very clear that they don't want to fill the shoes of the chamber. They want to promote business, they want to promote tourism, and that's it. But they're in such a nascent stage, they don't have the numbers on who visits. When I was working on that article, actually, I had immense trouble finding numbers of just how many people come to Manchester annually and what times of year. Eventually, I got it from the Vermont Department of Tourism or the Tourism Board. But there's no one really keeping track of that here at the moment.
One of the things that the MBA is doing by having by emphasizing the digital presence in this year's initiative is to start building that data set and understanding the demographics of who comes here, how many people actually look at the site, and then how many people actually reserve a room or click through to buy tickets for the Dorset Theatre Festival or for West End or for Manchester Music Festival. So I think that we're in the sort of the starting phases of understanding that on a statistical level.
Well, if they can, crunch down and get those numbers, that would be quite fascinating, because I know the creative economy has been a discussion point around here since at least, I think, 2007. I remember a big conference held here that talked about that, and we were all kind of excited about that for a little while. And then
I know that Phil Gilpin Jr.
recession.
I know Phil Gilpin Jr. is excited about that, and that's one of the big reasons that he did move ITV Fest here. And so it'd be interested to see if. Because we've talked about this, he and I, about how there's a lot of people in the creative industry who are second homeowners here or are retired here. They're sort of hiding in plain sight. And now this, if you start having a great enough concentration and you start bringing some creative economy businesses here, not simply hospitality or selling tickets, but post-production, for example, or maybe the occasional television shoot, maybe using one of the theaters or using a location, that would start to build the actual sort of jobs on the ground that would actually build a creative economy, and it builds off itself from there. And then it really sort of becomes something that can take its place alongside the other aspects of our overall tourism industry.
Well, it'll be fascinating stuff to follow. We have a little bit of time left, Greg, and I wanted to make sure you had a chance to talk about the sports gala you had and played a starring role in. I see interviewing an Olympian down in Bennington. Tell us about that. What was that all about?
Okay, the Bennington Banner and Manchester Journal Regional All-Stars Gala was held on Tuesday, June 27th at Bennington College's Greenwall Auditorium. Beautiful space, by the way. I hadn't been to it or to Bennington College before. I was very impressed by what we saw. We had a crowd of about 360 people on hand. We gave out awards in 21 Vermont Principals Association contested sports for 7 schools in Vermont, here in southern Vermont, and also Hoosick Falls and Cambridge in New York State, just across the line from Bennington. And I had the opportunity to have a question and answer with Gabby Douglas, the 3-time Olympic gold medalist in gymnastics. And she was fantastic. She was very open in her discussion about the challenges that she faced and the way that she was able to persevere. And so she had some messages for the student athletes in attendance, essentially about perseverance and about dedication. So it was a really positive experience. And it was the first time we'd ever, as a company as a whole, we'd ever done an event like that. I think we learned a lot from it, and it looks like we're going to be doing that again. So looking forward to it.
All right, we'll have to leave it on that note, but I wanted to thank both of you for being here today.
Thank you, Andrew.
Charisse Madigan, who, by the way, of course, I should have mentioned at the outset, is no stranger here to GNET, also the hostess of Vermont Voices, has had many important guests recently, and it's been fun to watch her show. And Greg Sukenik, the editor of the Manchester Journal. And thank you all for watching as well. This has been Press Pass on GNET TV. We'll look forward to seeing you again the next time. Have a great day.